VR is a medium of creating large worlds to immerse the player in a deep story and deeper mechanics that are intrinsic to themselves. Soulsborne games are a subgenre of difficult and expansive games with large worlds and larger stories. Both are definitively different, and yet both have had massive impacts on social and tech trends in the industries. And today I'll be talking about the impact that VR and Soulsborne games have had on designing and developing computer games to meet the requirements of the users and the computer games industry. Soulsborne games are games which have lots of bosses, enemies, gaining XP from those enemies and bosses, and then using that XP to upgrade the stats or powers of the player's character. Another staple of them are bonfires, which are save points for the player that let them rest, upgrade, and restock. They can use these to move to other locations, but they also respawn defeated enemies. Soulsborne games have been around for years, with hit titles such as Dark Souls, Bloodborne, and most recently, Elden Ring and its DLC. Soulsborne games are notorious for their difficulty and expansive and often confusing worlds. This can be positive and negative for the player, as it means the players feel a better sense of achievement after completing difficult areas or bosses.
Jerry, you did it!
That is
Jerry! Jerry!
bathed in rays
Fucking MVP!
This is seen from the From Software's president, Miyazaki, who explained that he himself is someone that died a lot when playing games, and he wanted people to find joy from dying. He did this by making the players experience the joy of overcoming hardship instead of failing repeatedly at hardship. He also said hardship is what gives meaning to these games, and it's part of their identity from their company's groundwork, and so it's something they won't abandon at the moment. This means that players who struggle through feel a great sense of accomplishment when they finish an area or a difficult boss. But for some, it can become a massive turn away from these games, as they seem too difficult with no other workaround except for just getting good at the games. This can be even more frustrating for these players, as these games are usually more high-end in the pricing range, from £30 to £60. This price range can be a deterrent from people buying these games, as they aren't confident enough to be able to buy and play a Soulsborne game that they don't want to commit up to £60 to that they might not finish. As well, if they can't finish the game, they would think that money wasted. On Steam alone, Elden Ring sold 25 million copies, but on Steve's achievement list, most achievements drop off to 50% or lower, and the game endings to 30% or lower, showing how not large proportions of the game's player base has played for that long or has gotten that far into the game. Despite all this though, Elden Ring on Steam still has 91% positive reviews, showing how players still enjoyed their time with the game, and that the games play well despite being hard. For some, this isn't an issue, as places like Xbox and PlayStation let you use their additional live services to play these games for free as long as you have paid for those services, like PlayStation Plus or Xbox Gold. Steam also puts the games on sale periodically throughout the year, which makes them a lot more affordable. The fact these games are on multiple consoles also means they're more accessible to everyone and can be played by more people, giving everyone the chance to play and giving the developers more money as a result. For the From Software developers, they don't pander to other trends in the gaming market, like battle passes and loot boxes. They make their games for the stories they want to tell and the experiences they want to give, not just solely for money. However, it could be argued other Soulsborne developers are following the trend that is making a Soulsborne game, but I would argue that these games still don't follow larger gaming trends. These games are a chance to make large and expansive worlds that are unique in both their mechanics and lore. Just take Elden Ring for example. During one of the first sections of the game, right around here on the map, you can meet Bok. He's disguised as a small tree asking for help. If you hit the tree, it breaks his disguise and he tells you how he was kicked out of his cave and offers to get you something for helping. You can then later find him, beaten, in the same cave, trying to get you a reward. You can then give him your sewing kit and he'll offer his seamster skills, where he tells you about his backstory of how he's been outcasted for his looks all his life. You can then help him by giving him an item which will let him change his looks, but unfortunately this will kill him. Or you can save him using a different item. It's a really good character with compelling endings either way, and it's something that players can entirely miss. This just shows how much care From Software put into their games, as they made this complex character with several motivations and interactions that don't even have to be seen. It can be negative for some of these developers might have spent months of their life for someone to maybe see all their hard work. This can be seen in channels like Viat Vadia, who has over 300 videos dedicated to just the lore of these games alone. And that's just one channel, showing the massive expanse of the lore and detail the developers go into. As well, it has become a standard of these games to become bigger and better, with expectations following to grow. This means that games take longer to make, cost more to make, and put a lot more stress on developers. Elden Ring took 5 years to develop and cost $200 million to make. However, in the course of its lifetime, Elden Ring has sold 13.4 million copies worldwide by the end of March 2022, and 25 million by June 2024, making $1.2 billion total. This means it's one of the top selling games and shows that the developers have a demand for their games and that they're only growing in popularity. This shows how the industry is there to support the games and how the Souls-like games have become a genre in themselves due to their popularity and persistence through the years. Due to this popularity and the amount of money the games make, the market has become populated with many other Souls-like games that have been made by From Software and other developers. This include examples like Another Crab's Treasure, Hollow Knight, Star Wars Jedi games, Lies of P, Lord of the Fallen, Wulong, Fallen Dynasty, Blasphemous, and that's just naming a few. This can be seen in two ways. One, it's good for the market as it means there's lots of different games for players, and it means the player has lots of different options for games, and that each new game has a chance to create new and interesting mechanics that make the player experience better. However, it could also be seen that the market has become oversaturated with these games, and many companies are just making them for getting a cash grab. This ruins the genre of games as it means the market is full of mediocre games that people don't want to play because they've played so many already. Now onto VR. VR is where people can put on a headset to experience immersive games or other experiences. VR has developed massively in the last 10 years, going from expensive hardware that couldn't run the few games that existed without an expensive PC, to now being affordable for the everyday household, thousands of games either being for VR, standalone, or as additional features of many games. For players, as stated before, VR has become much more accessible, with headsets like the Oculus Quest 2 and 3 costing around £200 to £300, whereas the first few generations of headsets like the Oculus Rift and the Vive costing around £700 upwards, showing how the cost has gone down significantly to something more affordable for the everyday user. The headsets are also more powerful, so much so that PCs don't have to be purchased alongside headsets. The Meta Quest 2 and 3 are a good example, as it's wireless, has access to a wide library of games on the Meta Store, and can also stream Steam games from the PC to the headset. However, this can be slower if the internet used is slow. They can also run games standalone, however some games are too resource heavy and require a PC to run them as well. The Quest 2 for each eye has 1832 by 1900 pixels, leading to high quality images. However, the Quest 3 has 4K resolution in each eye, with 2064 by 2208 pixels, which is quite a mouthful, meaning the quality has risen massively in only a few years. Although, VR in some cases still has a massive barrier for entry. Take for example Horizon Call of the Mountain. To play this game you have to purchase a PS5, then a PSVR 2, then the game on top, meaning for some people they can either make the choice between paying for their rent or playing VR. Compared to a game like Five Nights at Freddy's VR, which was available on all VR platforms and far outsold Horizon, FNAF was estimated to have made around $6.5 million, and Horizon's sale data couldn't even be found. VR games have also become more popular, so more studios are willing to take the risk to make them, which means more high-quality AAA games for people to play. Games like Batman, Metro and Half-Life are all series that are examples of making new VR games, as well as indie games are also being made, like Bone Labs, Rumble and Subnautica, just to name a few. These games have also increased in quality, meaning players can have a more immersive experience and truly get lost in virtual worlds. However, this has meant that games have become more expensive and they require more time and money to make, especially compared to desktop and console games. For developers, less people own VR, so they are guaranteed to sell fewer games if they make a VR compared to a desktop game. Another negative is that they are limited in the mechanics which they can put into VR, as they have to accommodate for their playing experience, trying to reduce motion sickness as much as possible. This was briefly discussed by the developers of the Arkham Shadow game, and they said how when developing a VR game, there are certain things you have to do, otherwise the game would be unplayable. For instance, never move the camera without the player's input, and allow for the option to use different locomotions like walking or teleporting. However, even though they can't put mechanics like rolling into their games, VR developers have come up with new and interesting mechanics around the body and using it within games. Superhot's whole gimmick is that when you move, the world moves, so not moving gives you more time to plan your moves and gives the game a whole different feeling to the fast-paced shooter it was before. Another game that has a unique experience around the player is Borne. This game, it has accurate physics simulation, and the player has a physical body that interacts with the world. This leads to a strange experience where you have more control over your environment and can interact with anything, which leads on to another positive for developers, the worlds they can create. These worlds can be massive and complex experiences that don't have to be bound in physics and reality and can make visually interesting scenes and scenarios that make a player awestruck, though developers still have to fit the constraints of the machines they are using, as even though they have gotten better, they still can't make their games too resource intensive or else it ruins the experience. For the industry, there has been a rise in the production of more VR games, both AAA and indie, meaning the industry is seeing more light and people have more reason to invest. Also, VR hardware has become a lot cheaper and better quality, which will make more people willing to try the technology and invest, like in the Meta Quest 3. Publishers are also starting to use larger IPs to draw in more revenue from VR. This has been evident with Batman Arkham Shadow, with the trailer having 624,000 views, and Horizon Call of the Mountain, which had brought 342,000 views just from their trailers. This proves how it's drawing in larger audiences to the industry, as other trailers of smaller IPs are only getting around 4,000 to 20,000 views, showing that the bigger IPs are drawing in much larger audiences than less popular or indie IPs. Overall, Soulsborne games have become a staple of the gaming industry, massively influencing how new games and mechanics are made and how the player can be treated as a whole, giving more power to the developers whilst challenging the player to get better at more difficult games and to be more resilient. VR games were quite lackluster in their first few years of release, but now that the technology has caught up to facilitate its needs, the developers and studios are willing to take more risks on making more VR games, and as a result, the industry has skyrocketed, and a lot of amazing games have been made which can make the player feel any way the developers want because of how intrinsically human VR is as a medium. In total, I believe that VR has had the most impact on gaming as a whole. This is because it's been able to draw in larger audiences and keep improving upon itself to make new and more complex environment and mechanics. Whereas Souls games have been improved and gotten bigger worlds and lore, but they are still built upon the same mechanics and they don't intend on trying a new style of game in that genre, making it feel more repetitive and stagnant. Thank you very much for watching, hope you had a good time, bye bye!